The phone call came at 2:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, the way I had every night since my daughter had gone to live under someone else's roof. When the screen lit up my dark bedroom, my heart did that terrible thing hearts do when you already know, somewhere deep inside, that nothing good ever calls at that hour. Is this Hannah Reyes? Mother of Lily Reyes? The voice was calm. Official. The kind of calm that makes your whole body go cold before your mind even understands why. Yes, I whispered. That's me. Ma'am, this is Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you about your daughter. I sat straight up in bed, my hand pressed against my chest like I could hold my own heart together with my fingers. Lily. My baby. My 7-year-old girl with the gap-toothed smile and the stuffed rabbit she never let go of, not even in her sleep. Where is she? Is she okay? Please, just tell me she's okay. There was a pause. The kind of pause that feels like falling. She's safe now, the woman said. But ma'am, we found her alone. Completely alone, in an apartment, for almost 2 full days. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember grabbing my keys or my coat or how I got to my car. I only remember driving through empty streets with tears blurring the road in front of me, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and one single thought pounding in my skull like a drumbeat. She promised me she would never leave her alone. She promised. To understand how I ended up in that car at 3 in the morning, chasing headlights toward a truth that would break me open and then somehow put me back together stronger than I had ever been, I have to take you back. Back to the beginning. Back to when I still believed that love, even broken love, came with a floor beneath it. A place where it couldn't fall any further. I was wrong. My name is Hannah. Before all of this, I was just a mother. An ordinary woman with an ordinary life, a small apartment on the edge of the city, a job at a pediatric clinic where I answered phones and calmed frightened children before their vaccinations, and a daughter who was, without question, the best thing I had ever done with my life. Lily came into the world on a rainy October morning, and from the second the nurse placed her on my chest, I understood a kind of love I hadn't known existed. Not the kind of love that asks for anything back. The kind that simply gives, and keeps giving, because the person you love is a part of you that walks around outside your body. Her father, Marcus, and I had been married for 5 years when Lily was born. For a while, we were happy, or at least, I thought we were. We had our small rituals. Sunday pancakes. Movie nights with the lights off and blankets piled high. Marcus used to sing to Lily in a voice that could not carry a tune to save his life, and she would laugh so hard she'd get hiccups. But somewhere in the space between Lily's 2nd and 3rd birthday, something in Marcus began to change. He started staying late at the office. His phone became a locked box he carried everywhere, even into the bathroom. He grew distant in that quiet, cruel way where nothing is technically wrong, but everything feels wrong. I told myself it was stress. Work. The pressure of being a young father. I made excuses for him the way women who love too much so often do. We build reasons out of thin air just so we don't have to face the truth standing right in front of us. The truth had a name. Vanessa. She was 26, blonde, beautiful in that curated, filtered way, a lifestyle influencer with 200,000 followers, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine, always smiling for a camera that wasn't there. I found out about her the way most betrayed wives do, not through a dramatic confession, not through Marcus finally telling me the truth, but through a text message that lit up his phone while he was in the shower. Can't wait until you're finally free. She doesn't deserve you anyway. I stood there in our kitchen holding his phone, and I felt something inside me crack, not shatter completely, not yet, just crack, the way ice cracks before it finally gives way beneath your feet. When I confronted him, Marcus didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked relieved. Like I had finally done the hard part for him. I was going to tell you, he said. I just didn't know how. How long? I asked, my voice shaking. Does it matter? It mattered. It mattered more than anything in the world in that moment, because every memory I had of the last year suddenly felt like a lie wearing the costume of my life. We separated 3 months later. The divorce was quiet, almost clinical, the way things often are when one person has already emotionally left long before the paperwork catches up. Marcus moved in with Vanessa within weeks. I kept the apartment. I kept my job. Most importantly, the court granted me primary custody of Lily, with Marcus receiving visitation every other weekend. I told myself that was the end of the worst of it. I told myself Lily and I would rebuild our lives, just the two of us, and we would be enough for each other. I didn't know yet that the worst of it hadn't even started. For the first year after the divorce, things were hard but manageable. Marcus paid child support, mostly on time. He picked Lily up every other Friday and dropped her off Sunday evenings, and though I hated watching my daughter climb into his car and drive away toward a life I wasn't part of, I told myself it was normal. Children adapt. Children are resilient. I read every article on co-parenting I could find, determined to be the calm, stable half of Lily's broken home. Then Vanessa entered the picture more permanently. Marcus and Vanessa got engaged just 14 months after our divorce was finalized. I remember the day Lily came home and told me, her small voice bright with excitement in the way only a child's voice can be when they don't yet understand the weight of what they're saying. Daddy's going to marry Vanessa. She said I can be a flower girl. I smiled for my daughter's sake, even as something twisted painfully in my chest. Not jealousy over Marcus, that door had long since closed for me. But fear. A quiet, nagging fear I couldn't name yet, the kind that lives in the pit of your stomach and only makes itself known months later, when it's too late to stop what it warned you about. Vanessa was polite to me in the beginning. Overly polite, in that performative way people are when they know they've done something they shouldn't have and want to smooth it over with charm. She'd wave brightly when picking Lily up. She'd compliment my parenting in a tone that always felt just slightly hollow, like a compliment wrapped around a knife. "You're doing such a good job with her," she told me once. "I really admire single moms." I smiled and said thank you, because what else do you say? But something about the way she said single mom, like a label, like a category she was studying rather than a woman standing in front of her, stayed with me. As the months passed, Marcus began pushing for more time with Lily. Then more overnight stays. Then, eventually, he brought a lawyer into the conversation, requesting a modification to our custody agreement, arguing that with his upcoming marriage, he could now provide a more stable, two-parent household for our daughter. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, my hands wrapped so tightly around a paper coffee cup that it crumpled in my grip. "He's trying to take her from me," I said. "Isn't he?" My lawyer, a tired but kind woman named Denise, folded her hands on her desk. "He's trying to expand his custody. It's not the same as taking her, Hannah. But we need to prepare. Courts do sometimes favor a two-parent household, especially if the other parent can show stability and resources." Resources. That word haunted me for weeks. Because Vanessa had resources. She had a 5-bedroom house with a pool. She had a car that cost more than I made in 2 years. She had brand deals and sponsorships and an entire curated online image of a woman who had everything beautifully together. And I had a 2-bedroom apartment, a job answering phones at a clinic, and a heart that would have walked through fire for my daughter but couldn't compete with granite countertops and designer nurseries built for a stepdaughter used as a prop in an Instagram post. The custody hearing was brutal. Marcus's lawyer painted a picture of me as overworked, overwhelmed, barely scraping by, technically true things twisted into weapons. Vanessa sat in the courtroom in a soft cream-colored dress, looking every bit the picture of composed, capable womanhood, and I watched the judge's eyes move toward her more than once. In the end, the court didn't take Lily from me completely. But it did modify our arrangement to a near-equal split, Lily would spend alternating weeks between my home and her father's, a decision that felt, in that sterile courtroom, like watching my daughter be sawed in half and told to smile about it. I cried in my car in the courthouse parking lot for 45 minutes before I could drive home. Not because I had lost everything, I hadn't. But because I understood, in that moment, that my daughter's life was now going to be lived across two very different worlds, and I had no control over what happened to her in the one that wasn't mine. But what I didn't know that day was that the world I couldn't control was about to become far more dangerous than I ever imagined. For the first several months of the new arrangement, things were tense but bearable. Lily would come home from her weeks with her father, sometimes quiet, sometimes withdrawn, and it would take me a day or two to coax her back into herself. I told myself it was normal adjustment. Children need time to transition between households. I didn't want to be the bitter ex-wife who saw shadows in every silence. But slowly, the things Lily told me began to worry me in ways I couldn't ignore. Vanessa says I have to be quiet when she's filming, Lily told me one evening while I braided her hair before bed. She gets mad if I make noise. Another time, Vanessa left me with the babysitter again. The babysitter watches her phone the whole time and doesn't really watch me. And then, one night that I will never forget as long as I live, Lily looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, Marcus's eyes, but with all of my heart behind them, and said something that turned my blood to ice. "Mommy, sometimes Vanessa forgets to make me dinner. I just eat crackers." I held my daughter that night longer than usual, my chin resting on top of her head, my mind racing through everything I could and couldn't do. I wasn't naive. I knew children sometimes exaggerated. I knew that in the middle of a bitter co-parenting arrangement, it would be easy, dangerously easy, to hear what I wanted to hear, to build a case against Vanessa out of the innocent complaints of a 7-year-old who simply missed her mother. So I didn't act rashly. I documented. I started keeping a private journal, writing down every concerning thing Lily told me, with dates and details, the way my lawyer had once advised me during the divorce. If you ever need to prove a pattern, Denise had told me, you need more than feelings. You need a record. I brought my concerns to Marcus directly, calmly, without accusation. She says she's not eating well over there. She says she's being left with sitters a lot. Is everything okay? Marcus's response was defensive, immediate, armored. Vanessa runs a business, Hannah. She's busy. Lily's fine. You're reading too much into a kid complaining because she'd rather be watching TV with you. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too frightening to hold in my hands. But something in me, some quiet, primal instinct that exists in every mother, the kind of instinct that predates language and logic, kept whispering that something was deeply wrong. I filed my concerns with my lawyer. I requested wellness check-ins be documented as part of our custody arrangement. Denise warned me that without solid evidence, the courts would likely see this as an attempt to undermine the custody agreement out of resentment, and it could actually hurt my case rather than help it. So I waited. I watched. I held my daughter a little tighter every time she came home to me, memorizing the shape of her, terrified that one day the pieces of her that came back to me would be fewer than the pieces I had sent away. Until everything changed on a Tuesday in early spring. It started with a single Instagram post. I wasn't someone who followed Vanessa's account, of course I wasn't, why would I torture myself that way, but a coworker at the clinic showed me her phone during a lunch break, her face pale with concern. "Hannah, isn't this your daughter's stepmom?" On the screen was a glossy, sun-drenched photo. Vanessa, standing on a cobblestone street somewhere in Italy, an Aperol spritz in hand, captioned, "Finally taking the trip I've been dreaming about all year. 10 days of pure me time in Europe. Sometimes a girl just needs to disconnect and find herself again. Italy sparkles self-care journey Europe trip." My stomach dropped through the floor. 10 days. It was Marcus's custody week. Lily should have been with them. I called Marcus immediately, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone to my ear. "Where's Lily?" I demanded the second he picked up. "She's fine, Hannah. Relax." I had a business trip come up unexpectedly, and Vanessa took a personal trip she'd already booked. "Lily's with a sitter. It's handled." "A sitter? For 10 days? While you're both out of the country at the same time?" "I'm not out of the country, I'm in Chicago for a conference. Vanessa's the one in Europe. It's completely handled, okay? Stop making this a thing. Stop making this a thing." As if my daughter's safety was an inconvenience to his composure. As if the panic rising in my throat was hysteria rather than instinct sharpened by every quiet, worried night I'd spent since the day the custody agreement changed. "Give me the sitter's number. Give me the address. Right now, Marcus." He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth again. I don't have the sitter's information off the top of my head. Vanessa arranged it. "You don't have your own daughter's caregiver's information?" The silence on the other end of that call was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. I hung up. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped my phone twice trying to dial Lily's small tablet, the one I'd bought her so we could video call during her weeks away from me. It rang. And rang. And rang. No answer. I called again. And again. 15 times over the next 2 hours, each unanswered ring driving a blade deeper into my chest. I called Marcus back, no longer able to keep the tremor out of my voice. "She's not answering. Marcus, she's not answering me. She's probably just asleep, Hannah, it's late." "It is not late. It's 4 in the afternoon." For the first time, I heard something crack in his own voice. A flicker of the fear I'd been carrying alone finally reaching him. Let me call the sitter." I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot, my whole body trembling, my mind spiraling through every horrific possibility a mother's imagination can conjure when her child is unreachable. 10 minutes later, Marcus called back, and his voice had changed entirely, thin, panicked, unraveling. "Hannah, the sitter says she only stayed the first night. Vanessa told her she wasn't needed after that. She said family was coming to help." "What family, Marcus? What family?" He didn't have an answer. Because there was no family. There was no plan. There was only my 7-year-old daughter, alone in an apartment, for I didn't yet know how long, while the woman entrusted with her care sipped wine on a rooftop bar in Rome and posted about finding herself. I didn't wait for Marcus to figure out his next move. I called the police non-emergency line first, my voice breaking as I explained the situation, and the dispatcher, bless her, whoever she was, didn't hesitate for a second. "Ma'am, I'm sending a wellness check right now. Stay on the line with me." Those were the longest 20 minutes of my life. I drove toward the address Marcus finally managed to dig up from an old text thread, running 2 red lights I don't remember approaching, my hands locked so tightly on the steering wheel my knuckles went white. When I arrived, there were already 2 police cars outside the apartment complex, lights washing silently across the brick walls in the dimming evening light. My legs nearly gave out beneath me as I ran toward the entrance, and an officer stopped me at the door. "Ma'am, are you the mother?" "Yes. Yes, please, is she okay? Is my daughter okay?" "She's okay," the officer said, and I felt the world tilt violently beneath my feet with relief. "She's a little shaken up, hungry, and scared. But physically, she's okay." I don't remember pushing past him. I don't remember crossing the living room. I only remember Lily, my Lily, sitting on the couch in pajamas that hadn't been changed in what looked like days, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, her eyes red and swollen from crying, surrounded by empty juice boxes and cracker wrappers she'd clearly been rationing to herself like a tiny, terrified adult trying to survive. The second she saw me, she launched off that couch and into my arms with a sob that broke something permanent inside me. "Mommy," she cried into my shoulder, her small body shaking. I was so scared. I didn't know when anyone was coming back. I held her so tightly I probably hurt her, rocking back and forth on my knees on that stranger's living room floor, whispering into her hair that I was here, I would never let this happen again. Over her shoulder, I looked up at the responding officer, and my voice came out in a whisper that didn't even sound like my own. "How long was she alone?" The officer's face was grim. "Based on what we're seeing and what your daughter has told us, ma'am, it looks like almost 2 days. 2 days. My daughter had been alone, unsupervised, for almost 2 full days, in a stranger's apartment, while the woman responsible for her care flew across an ocean for a vacation, and my daughter's own father hadn't even realized it until I forced the truth into the light. That was the phone call. That was the moment on the ceiling in my dark bedroom, the moment I told you about at the very beginning of this story. Except now you understand, that call wasn't the beginning of my nightmare. It was simply the moment the nightmare finally became visible to everyone else. I want to tell you that the anger came first. That I marched out of that apartment ready for war, ready to burn down every excuse Marcus and Vanessa would try to build around what had happened. But that's not what came first. What came first was grief. A deep, hollow grief for every warning sign I had documented and doubted myself over. Every time Lily told me she'd been left alone, every time she said she was hungry, every time I had wondered if I was simply a bitter mother inventing danger where there was only inconvenience, I had been right. I had been right the entire time, and I had let a system built on paperwork and procedure talk me into waiting instead of fighting harder, sooner. CPS arrived at the hospital where Lily was taken for a precautionary examination, a standard step, they explained, whenever a child is found in a situation of prolonged unsupervised neglect. I sat beside her hospital bed holding her small hand while a caseworker named Patricia gently asked her questions in a soft, practiced voice designed not to frighten a child further. "Lily, sweetheart, can you tell me what happened before the police came?" Lily's voice was small, but steady in a way that broke my heart even further, the steadiness of a child who had already learned, far too young, how to survive being forgotten. "Vanessa said the babysitter would come back. But she didn't come back. I waited by the door a lot. I tried calling Daddy but the phone was locked and I didn't know the numbers." Patricia wrote everything down, her expression carefully neutral, though I could see the tightness around her eyes, the look of someone who has done this job long enough to feel the weight of every case, even when trained not to show it. Later, in the hallway, Patricia spoke with me directly. "Ms. Reyes, I want to be transparent with you. This is a serious case of child neglect. Based on what we're seeing, the duration of time your daughter was left alone, her age, the lack of any emergency plan or contact left with her, this is going to trigger a full investigation into both households, including your ex-husband's home." "Both households?" I asked, my exhaustion suddenly sharpened into fresh fear. "I didn't do anything. I wasn't even there." "I understand," Patricia said gently. "But procedure requires us to evaluate the full custody situation, including your home, to determine what's in Lily's best interest moving forward. I need you to understand this isn't an accusation against you. It's protocol. And from what I'm seeing tonight, Ms. Reyes, I don't think you have anything to worry about." I wanted to believe her. But 3 years of watching a courtroom favor granite countertops over genuine love had taught me not to trust easily that the truth would simply be enough. But what I didn't know yet was that this investigation, the very thing I feared, was about to become the instrument that finally exposed everything Vanessa and Marcus had been hiding. The days that followed felt like living inside a fog. Lily stayed with me, and the court granted an emergency temporary order suspending Marcus's custody time pending the outcome of the CPS investigation. I should have felt relief. In some ways, I did. But I also felt the sick, hollow anxiety of watching my daughter flinch at loud noises, refuse to be left alone even to use the bathroom, and wake up crying in the night, whispering that she was scared no one would come. I took time off work. I sat with her through nightmares. I rebuilt it piece by piece, the safety that had been stripped from her by two adults who were supposed to protect her above everything else. Meanwhile, the investigation moved forward. Patricia visited my apartment for a home evaluation, walking through with a clipboard, checking the pantry, the smoke detectors, Lily's bedroom, my work schedule, my support system. I watched her write notes I couldn't read, and every second felt like an exam I couldn't prepare for. 2 weeks later, Patricia called to tell me my home had been fully cleared, with a formal recommendation supporting my continued primary custody, no concerns noted. Then she told me what the investigation into Marcus and Vanessa's household had uncovered. It wasn't just this one incident. Interviews with the original babysitter revealed that Vanessa had a pattern, canceling scheduled sitters at the last minute to save money, relying on Lily's ability to entertain herself for hours while she filmed content in another room, once even leaving Lily alone in a car outside a boutique for nearly 45 minutes while she shopped, an incident a concerned stranger had reported months earlier that had never been followed up on properly. Financial records subpoenaed as part of the investigation revealed something even more damning. Vanessa had received a significant brand sponsorship specifically for the Europe trip, a paid partnership requiring her to document solo self-care travel for her audience. The trip hadn't been a spontaneous personal need. It had been a paid job. And rather than delay it, reschedule it, or simply tell the truth to the brand she was working with, she had chosen to leave a 7-year-old child essentially unsupervised rather than lose the payout or the aesthetic of the single, free-spirited woman persona she'd built her entire following around. Marcus, for his part, hadn't been in Chicago for a conference at all. Records showed no such conference existed. He had, in fact, spent those days at a golf resort with colleagues, having assumed, without confirming, that Vanessa had hired appropriate childcare, because he trusted her to handle it, his own statement to investigators, word for word. 2 parents. 1 child. Both of them so consumed by their own lives, their own images, their own convenience, that neither had bothered to verify my daughter was safe for nearly 48 hours. When Patricia read me the final summary over the phone, I sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the wall, feeling something shift inside me, not into rage exactly, but into something colder and clearer. A resolve. Ms. Reyes, Patricia said gently, based on these findings, CPS is recommending the court modify custody entirely in your favor, with supervised visitation only for the father, pending further review, and no unsupervised contact for Vanessa at all. I closed my eyes. Somewhere far beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief, beneath the fear that had lived in my chest for over a year, something like justice finally began to take root. But justice, I would come to learn, is not something that simply arrives. Sometimes, you have to walk the rest of the way toward it yourself. The court hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare and giving CPS time to finalize their formal report. Those 6 weeks were some of the hardest of my life, not because I doubted the outcome, but because I had to watch my daughter slowly, carefully learn to trust the world again. We started small. A nightlight that stayed on all night. A promise, repeated every single morning and every single evening, that I would always tell her exactly where I was and when I'd be back. Therapy, twice a week, with a child psychologist named Dr. Alvarez who specialized in trauma and neglect. Slowly, so slowly, the flinching started to fade. The nightmares became less frequent. One evening, nearly a month after that terrible night, I heard something in our apartment I hadn't heard in far too long, my daughter, laughing, freely and fully, at a cartoon on the television, her stuffed rabbit tucked beside her on the couch, safe. I stood in the kitchen doorway and cried quiet, grateful tears, because that laugh, that small, ordinary, precious laugh, was worth more to me than any courtroom victory ever could be. But the courtroom victory still mattered. Not for revenge, though I won't pretend some small part of me didn't want to watch Vanessa's polished composure crack in front of a judge. It mattered because my daughter deserved a system that would formally, officially say the words she needed to hear. What happened to you was wrong. And it will never be allowed to happen again. On the day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom with a different kind of strength than the woman who had sat in that same building over a year earlier, crumpling a paper coffee cup in her fists. I wasn't fighting from fear this time. I was fighting from clarity. Marcus looked smaller than I remembered him, hollowed out, gray around the eyes, a man clearly unraveling under the weight of a mistake he could no longer talk his way around. Vanessa sat beside him in a modest, muted outfit, a stark contrast to the polished cream dress from our first custody hearing, as if even her wardrobe understood that charm wouldn't save her this time. CPS caseworker Patricia testified first, methodical and unflinching, laying out the full timeline, the pattern of neglect, the financial motive behind the Europe trip, the false statement about a non-existent conference. I watched the judge's expression shift from careful neutrality to something harder, sharper, as each piece of evidence was laid onto the table. Then it was Lily's turn, not to testify in the courtroom itself, thankfully, spared that trauma through a pre-recorded, professionally conducted interview Dr. Alvarez had helped facilitate weeks earlier. Watching my daughter's small, brave face on that screen, describing in her own simple words how scared she had been, how she had tried the door, tried the phone, tried to be good and quiet so that someone would come back for her, I watched the judge's jaw tighten, watched her write something down and underline it twice. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't come with anger prepared. I came with truth. I'm not here because I want to punish anyone, I told the judge, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm here because for over a year, I raised concerns that were dismissed as bitterness. I documented everything I was told, every warning sign, and I was made to feel like I was inventing problems to win a custody battle. I wasn't. I was trying to protect my daughter, and I was right to be afraid. I'm asking this court not for revenge, but for my daughter to finally be as safe on paper as she deserves to be in real life. The judge's ruling, when it came, was swift and unambiguous. Full primary custody restored to me, with sole legal decision-making authority. Marcus's visitation reduced to supervised sessions only, contingent on completing a court-mandated parenting course and a formal psychological evaluation. Vanessa was barred from any unsupervised contact with Lily whatsoever, a restriction the judge stated plainly reflects a demonstrated pattern of prioritizing personal and financial interests over the safety of a minor child. I felt something in my chest finally exhale, a breath I realized I had been holding, in some form, for over 3 years. The aftermath outside the courtroom unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. Word of the CPS investigation, initially just a private legal matter, eventually reached the attention of the very followers who had once admired Vanessa's curated, glossy life. It started with a single anonymous post referencing the situation, then a local news outlet picking up the story once court documents became part of public record. Within weeks, the brand that had sponsored her self-care journey to Europe issued a public statement severing all ties, citing conduct that does not align with our brand values. Other sponsorships followed suit. Her account, once boasting 200,000 admirers, became a landscape of comment sections filled with people who had once envied a life that had, in truth, been built on someone else's suffering. I won't pretend I didn't feel a flicker of something like satisfaction watching the walls of that carefully constructed image collapse in on itself. But mostly, I simply felt relief that it was over, relief, and a quiet, hard-won peace that I never could have imagined possible on that dark night when my phone first lit up at 2:47 in the morning. Marcus and I still co-parent, in the smallest, most cautious way now, under the boundaries the court set in place. He completed his parenting classes. He attends his supervised visits, and slowly, carefully, Lily is learning to trust him again in the limited, guarded way a child learns to trust a parent who once let her down so completely. I don't know if their relationship will ever fully recover the way it once was. That's not mine to control anymore. My job now is simply to make sure that whatever relationship they rebuild, it's built on a foundation that will never again put my daughter in danger. As for Vanessa, I never spoke to her again after that final hearing. I didn't need to. Some people don't need your anger to face consequences. Sometimes, the truth alone is enough to bring an entire carefully built life crashing down around someone, brick by brick, sponsorship by sponsorship, follower by follower, until all that's left standing is the person they actually were underneath it the entire time. Lily is 9 years old now. The nightlight is still in her room, though she tells me these days it's just for decoration, because she doesn't need it the way she used to. Her laugh has come all the way back, loud, easy, unguarded, the kind of laugh that fills up an entire apartment and spills out into the hallway. She still carries that same stuffed rabbit sometimes, worn soft from years of love, though these days it mostly just sits on her pillow, a quiet reminder of a night neither of us will ever forget, but neither of us has to be afraid of anymore. If there's one thing this entire journey taught me, it's this: trust your instincts, even when the world tells you they're too much, too dramatic, too suspicious. A mother's fear is rarely irrational. It is often the earliest, quietest form of the truth, arriving long before anyone else is ready to listen. I also learned that justice doesn't always come wrapped in the dramatic, satisfying way we imagine it in our angriest moments. Sometimes it comes quietly, through paperwork and testimony and a caseworker with tired eyes who simply does her job well. Sometimes the people who wrong us don't need to be destroyed by our hands at all. Sometimes, all they need is enough light shone on what they've done, and the truth does the rest of the work on its own. I don't carry hatred for Vanessa anymore. I did, for a while. Hatred is easy to hold on to, and for months it was the only thing keeping me upright. But hatred is heavy, and I had a daughter who needed my arms free to hold her, not weighed down by something as exhausting as revenge. What I carry instead is this: gratitude. Gratitude for a system that, however slowly, however imperfectly, eventually listened. Gratitude for a daughter whose resilience taught me more about strength than I ever could have taught her. And gratitude for myself, for the woman who sat in a courthouse parking lot crying for 45 minutes, and still, somehow, found the strength to keep showing up, keep documenting, keep fighting, until the truth finally had nowhere left to hide. If you're a mother reading this, holding a quiet fear in your chest that everyone around you keeps telling you is nothing, I want you to know something. It might be nothing. But it might not be. And you will never regret listening to that fear too closely. You will only ever regret not listening closely enough. My daughter is safe now. She is loved, she is laughing, and she is home. And every single night, when I tuck her into bed and she looks up at me with those wide, trusting eyes, I remember exactly how close I came to losing this, and I hold on to it a little tighter, grateful beyond words that the truth, in the end, always finds its way into the light.